Far from Home, Portraits of Displacement, written by Gabriel Ndayishimiye. A Writer's Confession. The nights stretch long and lean, like a rifle barrel aimed at your chest. You drink to chase away the ghosts, but they drink with you, and when the bottle's empty, they're still there, grinning with cracked teeth and hollow eyes. Writing is a sickness, and I think it's the kind that kills you slow. It starts with a need to say something real, to tell the truth about men and pain and the way the world grinds you down. But the truth doesn't want to be found. It hides like a wounded animal, mean and desperate, and you have to track it through the mud and the blood and the lies you tell yourself. When you're young, you think you can outsmart it. You write with fire and rage, pounding out sentences like you're throwing punches, and you think you've made something that will last. But time drags its heels through your words, and soon you see the cracks. The stories don't hold up. They don't hit as hard as you thought. You were just shadowboxing with your own pride, and pride's a cheap fighter. It falls easy, and it doesn't get back up. You start again. You drink more, think less, and try to let your hands do the talking. They don't. They just tremble, and the words come out wrong. You find yourself writing about things you never wanted to admit, losses that still taste like salt, and victories that feel hollow now. You bleed onto the page and hope it makes sense, but it doesn't. The world doesn't want your pain. It wants stories that make sense, with heroes and happy endings, and when you give it the truth, it turns its back like you've cursed its mother. But you keep writing because the sickness doesn't care about sense. It just keeps gnawing at your gut, reminding you that the stories are still there, still tangled and half dead, and no one else is coming to put them down. So you go on, knowing it might kill you, but not caring much anymore. Death's just another story, and maybe one day you'll write it right, make it sound like something worth fighting for. Sometimes, in the early morning when the light is thin and the air's cold as a razor, you think you might have caught a piece of it, just a sliver of truth, sharp and glinting like a knife's edge. You stare at the page, almost afraid to breathe, and then it's gone. Just another shadow, slipping out the door. You curse, pour another drink, and start again. Writing doesn't make you noble. It doesn't make you brave. It just makes you tired and angry and too stubborn to quit. But somewhere in the mess, there's a sentence that feels like a clean shot, and that's enough to keep you chained to the machine, bleeding out, one word at a time. The mornings are the worst. The light comes in sharp and cold, cutting through the dust that hangs in the air like old regrets. You sit there staring at the typewriter like it's a beast that needs taming, and you know it's got more fight in it than you do. Your fingers ache, your head pounds, and the last shot of whiskey didn't do a damn thing but make you mad at yourself for needing it. You tell yourself, today's the day you'll get it right. But you know better. You've been lying to yourself for years. Writing is like picking at a scab that never heals. You dig at it, peel it back, watch it bleed, and wonder why it never scars over. Maybe because some wounds aren't supposed to heal. You put your pain down on the page and hope it means something, but mostly it just feels like giving up secrets that no one asked for. It's not courage, it's desperation. You hope that if you tell the story enough times, it'll lose its teeth, but it never does. It just bites harder. I've written about the men who fought and died, who chased something bigger than themselves, even when it cost them everything. I thought writing was supposed to be like that, a noble pursuit. But it's not. It's a coward's way of pretending he's still in the fight. You make up stories because the real ones hurt too much. You try to convince yourself that telling the story is enough, that putting it down on paper redeems the failures and the missed chances. But it doesn't. It just makes them permanent, immortal in their ugliness. The real men, the ones I knew, they didn't talk about it. They didn't need to. They just lived, fought, loved, and died without needing the world to know why. Sometimes I think writing is for the ones too weak to carry their own pain. You push it out into the world, make it someone else's burden, and convince yourself it's art. Maybe it is. Maybe it's just cowardice dressed up in clean sentences and raw honesty. I don't know anymore. I just keep punching the keys, hoping for something that feels real. I hate how it never does. It's like trying to hold on to smoke. Just when you think you've got it, it slips through your fingers and leaves you empty-handed and bitter. You hate it, but you can't walk away from it. There's nothing else that makes you feel like you're still fighting, even when the fight's long over. The world doesn't need another writer. It needs men who can look life in the eye and not blink. But here I am, eyes bloodshot and hands shaking, trying to make sense of the mess I made. Writing is a sickness, and the cure is just more of the same. Bleed a little more, drink a little deeper, and pray the words don't betray you again. The light gets warmer as the day drags on. But it doesn't matter. You're stuck to the chair, chained to the machine, daring it to beat you again. You'll lose, but losing is familiar, and sometimes it's all you've got. There's a tiredness that settles in your bones when you've been fighting the same fight too long. It makes everything feel heavy. The air, the bottle, the words that don't fit no matter how hard you shove them into place. You start thinking about what it means to belong somewhere, and whether you ever did. It gets harder to remember why you started in the first place. The sickness runs deeper than words. It's in the way you never feel at home, even when you're under your own roof. You're a stranger to yourself, and you wonder when that happened. Maybe it started in the war, when the noise and the dirt got under your skin and nothing felt real except the pain. Or maybe it was long before that, when you looked at your old man and knew you could never be as strong as him. Doesn't matter. The point is that you never learned how to fit in once you made it back. You're always 2 steps behind the rest of the world, watching it move on while you're stuck, replaying old battles and wondering why you're still here when better men aren't. And then you think of the ones who lost more than you did, the ones who never got the chance to come back home and hate it, the men who stood on foreign soil, staring at the sky like it was playing a cruel joke, the ones who buried their dead in borrowed ground and walked away, knowing they'd never see their own soil again. You think of how they carried that loneliness like a stone tied to their chest and kept moving forward because stopping wasn't an option. Displacement doesn't just mean losing a place. It means losing yourself. It's like getting pushed out of your own life, watching it from a distance as it goes on without you. You're stuck wandering from one empty room to the next, trying to remember where you're supposed to be. Sometimes it's a country that doesn't feel like home anymore. Sometimes it's a life that's grown strange and cold. You think of the men who went to war and came back changed, but it's not just them. You think of families crammed into shelters, children sleeping in doorways, and old men with weathered faces wandering streets that don't remember their names. Displaced by war, by time, by life itself. The world is full of people who don't belong, looking for scraps of meaning in places that don't fit. And maybe that's what the sickness really is, the sense that you're one of them. You carry that sense of not fitting, not belonging, and it claws at you like a rabid dog. Writing doesn't fix it. It just carves out a space where the ache can breathe for a while. You wonder if the world's just one long portrait of displacement, people pulled from what they know and set down somewhere that never quite fits. The light in the room shifts, and you can feel the loneliness pressing in. The typewriter waits, its keys gleaming like teeth in the fading sun. You wonder if anyone's ever really at home. Maybe it's all borrowed ground and we're just passing through, trying to make sense of it before it swallows us whole. You write because it's the only way to touch that truth without breaking apart, and you keep hoping one day it'll make sense. Until then, you keep chasing it across pages, across years, across empty streets and battlefields that never leave your head. You wonder if the stories matter, if the ache means something, and if one day you'll write the right words and finally feel like you belong somewhere, even if it's just on the page. Your house doesn't feel like yours anymore. Maybe it never did. It's not your house. It never was. You took it on a loan, signed your name to it in the early years of your wedding, when hope was louder than fear, and you still believed in futures that could be built. A mortgage, the bank's house, really, with your name scribbled at the bottom of a stack of papers you barely understood. You thought it was a beginning. You thought it meant something. A place where love would settle in and roots would take hold. A place where mornings would be filled with soft sunlight and her laughter. But the house never softened to you. The rooms stayed cold, the walls bare, like it was waiting for someone else to make it theirs. You patched the roof, painted the walls, hung shelves that leaned crooked, no matter how many times you leveled them. It was always temporary, like the house knew you'd never belong to it, and it would never belong to you. It tolerated you, but it never welcomed you. Now it feels like an empty shell, like a hollow carcass you're squatting in. The air is stale, and the windows are stiff in their frames. You walk through the narrow hallways like a ghost, trailing your fingers along the cracked paint, remembering when it all still had meaning, when you thought you were building a life that mattered, when she still looked at you like you were something worth holding on to. You can hear the echoes of arguments still bouncing off the walls, sharp words slicing through the air, punctuated by doors slamming and your own silence swallowing up the sound. She used to cry in the bedroom with the door closed, and you sat on the edge of the bed on the other side, hands twisted together like you were trying to wring the guilt out of your skin. You never knew how to say the right thing, so you stayed quiet. And the quiet became a wall you couldn't break down. The house remembers. It remembers how you stayed up late in the kitchen, the dim light over the sink flickering like it was tired too, your hands stained with ink from the letters you never sent. It remembers the nights you paced the floor, half drunk and muttering to yourself like a madman, trying to make sense of what went wrong. You thought the house might answer, might whisper something that would make it all clear, but it just stood there, indifferent, its bones creaking in the wind. Now it's just you. The house hasn't changed, but you have, carved down, worn thin, something brittle left in place of who you were. You walk through it like a trespasser, your own memories crowding you out, suffocating you. You left once, ran from the house and from her, from the guilt that coiled around your heart and squeezed like it wanted to crush you. You thought leaving would make it easier. You thought being anywhere else would make it hurt less. But you came back. You always come back. The house doesn't welcome you, but it doesn't reject you either. It just waits, cold and indifferent, letting dust pile up like regret on every surface. The windows haven't been cleaned in years, and the light comes through dull and weary, like it's given up too. You shuffle through the rooms like a condemned man, brushing your fingers over faded pictures and broken trinkets that used to mean something. There's a stain on the living room floor where you spilled wine on her birthday and tried to clean it up with old towels and apologies. It never quite came out. The house held onto it like a grudge. You sit at the old kitchen table, the one that rocks on its uneven legs, and stare out the window. You can see the weeds pushing up through the cracked stone path, like the world trying to reclaim the place inch by inch. You can't blame it. Even nature knows that some things aren't meant to last. You don't know why you stay. Maybe because leaving means admitting that it's over, that the dreams you had here are nothing but old shadows that cling to the corners like cobwebs. Maybe because running again would make you the coward you're afraid you are. Or maybe because you still hope the house will forgive you, will somehow wrap you in its walls and tell you it's okay to let go of the guilt. But it doesn't. It just sits there, silent and stubborn, holding on to the pieces of your life like it knows they're all you have left. You light a cigarette and let the smoke curl up to the cracked ceiling, wondering if the house breathes it in too, taking a piece of you and keeping it like it's always done. You don't belong here. You never did. But you're too tired to leave. So you sit and wait for something to change, even though you know it won't. The house isn't haunted. You are. And it knows it, too. You walk through the narrow hallways like a ghost visiting a life that was never yours to begin with. Dust settles on the windowsills, thick and unmoving, like time gave up on the place, too. You pick up a cracked photograph from the shelf. Your mother, smiling beside a field of sunflowers, the way the light fell on her face, making it look like she was glowing. It was taken before the men came to burn the fields, before the fighting turned familiar streets into graveyards. You set it down and don't look at it again. Some memories are better left buried. There's no going back to that place. You know it. The war took it. Then time finished the job, leaving nothing but rubble and broken stones where lives used to bloom. You're a man without a country now, and you wonder if that's why the stories come out twisted and raw. It's like trying to catch smoke everything slipping through your fingers, and the more you write, the further away it gets. Exile makes a man quieter than he wants to be, makes you think too much. The old men at the bar have stories of home, too, places they talk about like they're still there, like they never left. They talk about the smell of the market in the morning, the sound of church bells on Sundays, and the taste of the bread their mothers used to bake. Their words are heavy with homesickness, and you know that kind of weight. It bends your spine, makes you stoop like you're carrying a mountain on your back. You listen to their stories and pretend you're not the same, but you are. You're just quieter about it. You don't talk about the river that ran through your town, about how you'd watch the sunset dip behind the hills while your father cleaned his rifle on the porch. You don't mention the stone church with the cracked bell that only rang on holidays. You don't think about the last time you saw it, half buried in smoke and crumbling under artillery fire. You don't talk about how you walked away, swearing you'd never come back, and how you still dream about it, like it's waiting for you to find it again. Displacement does something to a man. It hollows you out and fills you with ghosts, memories that can't find a resting place. You look around at the people who never left and wonder how it feels to have roots that go deeper than fear. You try to write it down, to give it words, but the stories come out crooked, like they're afraid to show themselves fully. The city you're in now doesn't know your name, and you don't bother to learn its streets by heart. It's just another place to haunt until it becomes unbearable and you move on. You tell yourself you're not looking for home, but you know that's a lie. Every new town, every rented room, you're looking for something that feels like it did before the world broke apart and made you a man with no flag, no land, no place to call your own. Sometimes you write about men like yourself, exiles, drifters, men without roots. You tell yourself it's fiction, but it's just a mirror held up to your own restless soul. The words scrape against the page, and when you're done, it feels like you've spilled your guts out and left them to dry. You want the stories to matter, to make someone feel something, but most nights it just feels like you're shouting into an empty room. You know you'll never go back. Even if you did, it wouldn't be the same. The war changed it, burned it clean of anything familiar. And maybe you've changed too, carved down to the bone, stripped of softness, carrying the ache of belonging nowhere and everywhere all at once. You pour another drink and watch the sun set behind the ragged skyline, and you know you're just a man out of place, carrying stories no one wants to hear, an exile in your own skin. And maybe that's the real sickness, believing that someday you'll write the story that puts you back together, that makes the wandering make sense. But you know better than to believe in miracles. You write because it's the only way to give the ghosts a place to rest, even if it's just for one more night. The books sit on the shelves like gravestones, spines cracked and faded from too many years of moving from one dusty room to another. You run your fingers over the titles: philosophy, history, politics, the words that once shaped your convictions like a blacksmith hammering steel. Now they feel hollow, remnants of a younger man who thought that intellect could shape the world, that words could turn the tide of history. You used to believe that reason and rhetoric could be sharper than any blade. That if you could just string the words together, right, you could make people see, make them understand, make them fight for something better. But that was before the world taught you how little words mattered when guns spoke louder. You remember standing in the square, giving speeches that felt like fire in your mouth, the crowd drawn in like moths to a flame. For a moment, you thought you had something, thought you could bend the world's ear, force it to listen. Then the soldiers came. They marched in with their rifles and iron faces, broke down doors and cracked skulls, and the people scattered like startled birds. Your words didn't stop them. The pamphlets you wrote, the essays you printed late into the night, they fluttered in the gutters like dead leaves. You burned the last stack yourself, watched the paper curl and blacken, the ink bleeding out in the flames. Ideas meant nothing when steel ruled the day. You fled that night, hid in the back of a wagon, and crossed the border with nothing but a battered notebook and a mind full of ashes. Now, you sit here in this dingy room, the typewriter waiting for you to string more words together, and you wonder why you even bother. Writing doesn't change anything. It's just a way to hear your own thoughts without going mad from the silence. You think about your friends from the movement. Some dead, some imprisoned, some scattered to other countries, where their names don't mean a damn thing. You wonder if any of them still believe in what they fought for. If they're still whispering about change, or if they've learned to keep their heads down, blending in like shadows, not daring to speak. You think of men like yourself, educated, thoughtful, men who spoke of revolutions with wine on their breath and fire in their eyes. Now they're nothing but forgotten idealists, exiles, without a country, without a cause. The city you're in now doesn't ask you questions. It doesn't care that you were once a professor, once a voice that challenged the regime, once a man who believed in the written word. It just swallows you up like every other foreigner, clinging to the edges of society, scribbling useless thoughts while the world moves on without you. You spend your days in libraries that smell of dust and despair, pulling books off the shelves like they might hold an answer you missed the first time around. There's comfort in the familiar words of old thinkers, Fanon, Foucault, Said, Dabashi, Mbembe, Mudimbe, Grovogi, Camus, Sartre, Dostoevsky. But they don't make sense like they used to. Once, you believed that existential struggle was noble. Now it just feels exhausting. You wonder how many of them were exiles too, men out of place, holding on to ideas like lifeboats while the world rotted around them. Sometimes you write essays about displacement, about how exile strips a man of his identity and makes him a ghost in his own skin. You draft articles for papers that never reply, and letters to friends who stopped writing back. The words feel futile, like throwing pebbles into a vast, indifferent ocean. You're not sure why you keep doing it. Habit, maybe, or the need to prove to yourself that you haven't given up entirely. You know the world doesn't need another essay about loss or the futility of ideology, but it's all you know how to do. Ideas still churn in your mind, relentless and unforgiving, and the sickness of needing to put them down on paper hasn't left you. You try to write about your homeland, about the streets you can't walk anymore, the faces you can't look in the eye, but it hurts too much to be honest about it. Instead, you write abstracts about displacement as a human condition, about how the intellectual in exile is both a thinker and a coward, a man who couldn't bear to die for his beliefs and now lives with the guilt of survival. When the evenings come and the whiskey's gone, you think about going back just to see the ruins, to remember what you fought for. But there's nothing to go back to. The world moved on, replaced you with men who don't remember your name or your words. It hurts to admit that what you once thought was noble now feels like folly, and that all your convictions were just flowers crushed under a soldier's boot. You light a cigarette, watch the smoke curl toward the cracked ceiling, and wonder if you ever really believed it would change anything. The sickness of needing to write doesn't fade, and you know you'll sit down again tomorrow, fingers aching, brain buzzing with useless thoughts, and try to make sense of it all one more time. You're an exile from your own life, an intellectual without purpose, a man who once had fire in his veins and now just bleeds ink onto paper that no one will read. You know it doesn't matter. But you write anyway, because that's what men like you do. Write about loss, about belonging, about the ache of being a stranger to everything familiar. You write because, somewhere in the mess, you hope to find a sentence that makes it all feel real again.